the majority of Black kids cannot pass a basic literacy exam. The majority of Black kids cannot pass a basic mathematical exam across the country. And you're saying, well, what we need is even more intervention, which is to put them longer into these school systems that are failing them. I'm not sure that makes sense. So I actually think that we need to remove, and let me just pitch my thing. I know that you love government. I know that you think government is a solution. I think government is every ill. We can wax poetic about that into perpetuity. But the reality is that the school systems and the government are failing our children intentionally, because what they are doing is they are trying to rebuild the slave system that was in place, and they're doing it with a sleight of hand. If you want to talk about a sleight of hand, it's the fact that the slave codes existed and they barred children from being able to read, Black people from being able to learn how to read for a reason, because when people are not educated, they can be easily enslaved. That is what we are seeing right now. The majority of Americans are not well read, but they're on TikTok and they're on Instagram, and they believe everything they see is a reality. You're recreating Plato's allegory of the cave. These people jump when they see shadows on the wall, referring to that allegory, when in reality, they have no sense of what happens when you come out of the cave. So this is intentional. The government knows what it's doing, right? This is the reason why they're pushing through things that you have supported, like I'm sure you've supported, I'm guessing, because you like government initiatives, like CRT and like these things in the classroom. They're going to replace hard academics.
But
did you support it?
I don't know if it's a thing to support, but I don't consider it a government initiative either way.
It is a government initiative, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to replace hard academics with emotional engineering. They're literally turning Black Americans into slaves again, slowly, right? So if you look at every single system that was put into place so they could maintain slavery for as long as they did, is the breakdown of family. You know, when you read Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery, and he talks about how he had no feelings because they wanted the slaves not to be attached to their kin because they were constantly trading them. They're doing that today via welfare policies, incentivizing poor behavior. When you take a look at the fact that kids aren't learning how to read, again, that was another slave code. Virtually everything that they're doing right now to Black Americans is the recreation of slavery. And unfortunately, Black Americans are not seeing that because there are too many Black voices in media.
No, I think we do see it. I think we do see it.
No, I don't think they do, because you're sitting here saying to Black America, I know the government has always failed you, but all you need is a little more government, and this time it's going to fix. You need more free stuff. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. So I am begging your audience, if you have been listening to Marc Lamont Hill, let me just finish. I'm on your show. You have to be nice. If you're listening to Marc Lamont Hill, okay, and you are realizing that, you know, I think he's a nice guy. I think he's well-meaning. I also think he's smart. But I also know that he's wrong, okay? I know that he's wrong. And the biggest case for understanding that he's wrong is to simply look around you. Look around you, okay? Everything is falling apart. The answer is not more government. The government did this. It is absolutely foolish to believe that the government is going to solve it. It's not. Your enemy is the government. Your enemy is not Candace Owens. Your enemy is not conservatives and Republicans. Your enemy is the government, okay? Yep. They are recreating the slave model that served them so well in the past.
So let me start with where we agree, and then I'll tell you where you're completely 1000% mind-bogglingly, earth-shatteringly wrong. Okay. All right. So we'll start with, and I know you have to run, right? So I want to make sure I honor your time. So I'm going to do this efficiently. First, I agree that this country is built on the exploitation of a racialized people. In this case, it's Black people. Black people.
Well, all people now.
Well, I can't get in the weeds of that, but I would disagree. It's not all people, but at the end of the day, if we're talking about the Black community has been exploited since day one. I think we might agree on that. The Black community has been exploited since day one, and these systems are designed to keep us in a perpetual state of subservience, of exploitation. We never organize around the issues that we need to, and we never can achieve our liberation because we're moving in the wrong direction. I think we all agree. I think we both agree on that as well. Here's where I disagree with you. First, the idea that because the government, the state, however you want to talk about it, has waged a war against the people means that we shouldn't have any government or we shouldn't have any state, to me, is a slippery argument and a dangerous argument. Instead, I think what we need to do is, as many radicals do, and I come out of a radical tradition, is we need to radically reimagine the world. We need to radically restructure the system so that we're not in a position of exploitation. We right now are being driven from schools to prisons. There's no doubt about that. But the answer isn't to not have school. And I'm not saying you're saying don't have school, but if we're saying that these government institutions are as such problematic and that government institutions don't work at all, then we'd also be saying, let's get rid of the public school system, which again,
that's what I want. I think we should abolish that. Yeah.
And Donald Trump has said that, and other people have said that too. And you're all completely wrong. I think
we're not wrong. You can't point to a single metric where kids have done better since the establishment of federal education. So how can we be wrong? You're actually so right.
Sure you can. I can tell you something. So first, the creation of the common school movement at the end of the 19th century under Horace Mann allowed access to school for people who previously didn't have access. So before there was a public school system or a common school system, poor people, landless people.
We're talking about federal. We're not talking about school. We're talking about abolishing the Department of Education because
I'm with you, but you got to be nice to me too. Okay. So that local system in Massachusetts does become the model for the federal system, and we did develop a federal education system, which under things like the ESEA and the ESSA and other public policies from the 50s forward have created investment in public education. Mechanisms of accountability to make sure that the poorest families and the most vulnerable families get access to school, just as an example. Now, the problem is those metrics became the end itself. So now we don't worry about whether poor people get a good education. We just worry about whether people check off the right thing on the test. And the schools themselves need an exploited class, and those people end up in jail. I agree with you. The school system is fundamentally flawed and needs to be repaired. I'm just saying that doesn't mean we get rid of all systems or all public or federal or government systems. It simply means that we can't use the ones that we have right now.
Yeah, we need to abolish the Department of Education is my viewpoint because it's been a marked failure. There's no way you can say it's been a success. There's not a single metric you can point to point to the fact that the Department of Education, since it was established, has been a success. It hasn't. It just hasn't. Kids have gotten dumber. Even the kids that were not going to school were smarter. Yes, they have. Even the children, and I will challenge your readers as I challenge my listeners, go back, Google it online, read a letter that was written from a Civil War soldier that had never gone to school. You're going to read it and you're going to be like, wow, this reads like poetry. I can't believe this. What happened? What happened was the federal government, every time they get their hands involved in anything, it makes things worse. Candace, so we are talking about abolishing the Department of Education.
Go to school. That's the federal intervention. We couldn't go. My father couldn't go to 12th grade because there was no federal intervention. My grandfather couldn't go to school.
Was your grandfather and father smarter than you?
Probably, yeah. But
bam. Gotcha.
But I'm talking about level of intelligence. I'm not talking about book knowledge.
Gotcha. No, and they're probably more successful. My grandparents, who did not go to school, are more successful than their children were, who went to school. So it's like I'm not of the belief that the education system is serving children. It is actually making people non-entrepreneurial. It's turning them into robots and also slaves to government. All they do is beg for more governance to fix their own problems because they don't even know how to change a light bulb or change a tire. And yet they can rant to you about BLM. It's been a failure. I'm sorry. It's about emotional engineering. Kids are emotional and they don't have.
Candace, what you're ignoring is the fact that without these systems, we didn't have access. My father and grandfather were likely far more intelligent than I was, but my grandfather wasn't allowed to learn how to read. My father did go to school. Yeah, he wasn't allowed to learn how to read.
What year was your grandfather born that he wasn't allowed to learn how to read?
He's 50. He was born. My father was born in 1929, and his father was 48 at the time. So a quick math thing would be 18.
Your grandfather?
Yes, my father
was not allowed to learn how to read?
No, in Wilkes County, Georgia, no. It was not permissible to learn how to read in the 1880s, although it was juridically possible, but post-Emancipation Proclamation, no, he could not. He couldn't read. He also couldn't intermarry. There was a million things my grandfather.
I know about the marriage, but I'm just wondering what year your grandfather was born in.
Whatever 48 minus 1928. Somebody do the math for me.
Well, what happened if he was caught reading?
The issue is less about what he was punished for, but rather that the institutions themselves weren't allowed to teach him.
So are you saying you're just talking about what are you talking about? Like segregation?
Let me phrase it more succinctly. It was illegal to teach him how to read.
Okay.
Yeah. So so he could have been smarter than me, but his outcome wasn't better. My father wasn't allowed to finish 12th grade. There was no 12th grade for Black people in Wilkes County, Georgia. So he had to come up north and go to Temple High School and do all this other stuff to finish. I had access. Why? Because I had access to a federal system that demanded an equal opportunity for everybody. So federal government has mattered for Black people. They have intervened for Black people.
I just listen, just so you know, your experience doesn't become carbon copy the experience for all Black people. Black people were more entrepreneurial. Our families were together. My grandfather grew up in the segregated South, and he, once segregation was removed, which was obviously a wrong and an ill, that allowed for equal opportunity and a lot of networking. And my grandfather started a business when he was young, and so he didn't have a degree. So I don't have this perspective that and by the way, again, to be clear to people listening to this, what we're talking about two different things. I'm talking about abolishing the Department of Education, which didn't happen until 1970. You're talking about before then. I am saying that people fared better before federalized education. There isn't a single metric that you can point to that federalized education has been a good for this country. It's simply
I'm saying there is.
Okay. But you're talking about your grandfather. That would be, if he's born in 1880s. That's before the federal education.
No. I didn't. That wasn't my grandfather. Was the answer to that? That was the answer to the question about sort of generational progress. And I was saying that before these systems, there may have been smart people like my ancestors who didn't have access, and like your ancestors who didn't have access. And I'm saying access itself is a measure of progress. If I couldn't
well, I would say the fact that Black Americans are poorer today than when we began welfare policies in the mid-1960s is probably a pretty significant metric to tell you that it's all been a failure, government intervention. And because it was established by someone who was an avid racist, who actually said on record, I'll have those Black people, those N-words, he said, like the hard R, voting Democrat for the next 200 years, as he signed in welfareism into legislation, probably matters. I'd look up LBJ and how racist the man was, and how he even impacted his racism over in Vietnam. But sure, if you think that LBJ had your best interest at heart while he was talking about, I think I say abolish it. I say abolish it. Welfare.
No, that's not what I'm saying.